Our story begins with a man reborn as a white snake deep within the 100,000 mountains, forced to adapt to a brutal environment. To survive, he suppressed his humanity with animal instinct, spending his days dancing for eagles or practicing boxing with rabbits. 20 years later, he had successfully become the undisputed overlord of the region, though he had grown cold and ruthless in the process. The memories of his past life were fading fast, until the day a simple herb gatherer fell into the mountain river. Driven by a lingering spark of humanity, he rescued the man from the water and carried him safely to the foot of the mountain. He assumed that would be the end of the matter, but to his surprise, the fellow appeared before him again just a few days later. The man pulled a few boiled eggs from his robe, offering them in sincere gratitude for the snake having saved his life. He explained that without the snake's help, his family wouldn't survive, and he hoped to continue gathering herbs in these mountains. He even asked for the great snake's protection, which, to be honest, struck our protagonist as a bit greedy and left him speechless. He simply turned and left, but the gatherer took the lack of a lethal bite as a sign of consent and returned frequently from then on. The man became a regular fixture in the forest, while the snake watched from the high branches as he gathered herbs and tended to seedlings. Slowly, a small herb garden began to flourish, and whenever they crossed paths, the man would sit down and chat like an old friend. He would talk about how the harvest was feeding his family and offer endless thanks, the kind of talk that eventually became quite repetitive. Eventually, the snake grew so tired of the man's constant chattering that he began to actively avoid him for the next 6 months. As the seedlings matured and the harvests grew larger, the man's success unfortunately began to draw the jealous eyes of his fellow villagers. One day, after finishing his usual cultivation and breathing in the mountain mists, the snake suddenly sensed something wrong in the garden. He detected 3 heat signatures belonging to humans and felt a surge of rage, assuming the gatherer had brought strangers into his domain. Thinking the man had finally overstepped by treating the forest like a private backyard, the snake slithered down the mountain in a fury. However, upon reaching the garden, he found the herb gatherer lying on the ground with blood at the corner of his mouth. The man was desperately clutching a villager's leg, crying out that these were his herbs and they couldn't be taken away. The thug sneered, asking if the mountain belonged to him, and declared that this was their territory now. They accused him of stealing, and as the other two moved to uproot the herbs, the gatherer reacted desperately. He let go of the lean man's leg and spread his arms wide to protect his 2 most valuable plants. He refused to budge no matter how much they struck him, a sight that our snake found rather peculiar. He wondered if these common herbs were truly worth such a beating and debated whether he should intervene. But then, the lean man's face turned a deep, angry red as he let out a sharp, ragged breath. In a fit of rage, he drew a heavy wood-cutting machete and swung it directly at the gatherer's back. The blade wasn't sharp, but its weight carved a deep wound, leaving the other 2 villagers absolutely stunned. They were just simple mountain folk and had never intended to kill a neighbor, but the leader didn't care. He barked that no one would ever know, trying to implicate them, but he was met with total silence. When he finally turned around to see why they weren't moving, he felt a sudden, crushing tightness around his neck. A searing pain followed as the snake's venom surged through him, a dose so lethal that no medicine could save him. After releasing the dying man, the snake raised his head and fixed his cold gaze on the remaining 2. Terrified out of their wits, they scrambled away in a panic, and he felt no guilt whatsoever in letting them go. 20 years of living as a predator had long since eroded his human heart, and the gatherer watched him in horror. It seemed that only now did the man remember that the white snake before him was a lethal, wild beast. After disposing of the body in a deep crevice, the snake returned to the garden, only to find a change. The gatherer became quiet, and from that day on, his eyes held a new, unmistakable flicker of fear. Eventually, the talking stopped entirely. As the weather cooled, the man harvested his herbs and never returned. His little garden slowly fell into ruin, and the snake returned to his solitary life, focused solely on his cultivation. It wasn't until the following year that the gatherer returned, but he only stayed long enough for a distant, fleeting glance before leaving. What our snake didn't know, however, was that rumors were spreading like wildfire outside about a massive white serpent that had attained spiritual power. The stories even claimed he had a crown on his head and a taste for human flesh, leaving this entire mountain range utterly deserted. And so, another 10 years passed in silence. His body grew stronger, and a strange energy began to coalesce within him. He didn't quite understand what it was, but he could feel this chi constantly tempering his form. Then, one day, everything changed. A familiar human figure suddenly appeared within his heightened senses. It was the gatherer, returning just as he had a decade ago. His hair had turned even whiter. 10 years had transformed the man who once risked his life for herbs into a weathered, weary soul. With his hunched back and frail frame, he likely couldn't climb the cliffs anymore. 10 years is a long time, after all. The old man sighed, saying he never expected to see the snake again, now that he had become nothing more than a useless old fool. He lamented that he could no longer earn money and had become a burden for his son and daughter-in-law to support. He shared that his wife had passed away 2 springs ago during a drought. She wouldn't listen to reason when food ran out. She had eaten white clay to stave off hunger and only lasted 7 days. Deep down, the old man knew the truth. She had done it to save what little grain was left for the children. Our snake listened to this tragedy in total silence. For the first time, he didn't find the man's rambling annoying. This old laborer who had spent his entire life struggling just to survive. In the end, he couldn't change his fate of poverty. He didn't understand why, but the snake saw the reality of this world. In this ancient era of rigid classes and chaos, most people found a good life impossible. Simply staying alive was a struggle. Survival itself was treated like a gift from the powerful elite. That afternoon, as the gatherer left, it was clear his time was short. The snake caught the unmistakable scent of death clinging to him. Perhaps the man would be happy to finally reunite with his wife. He would also be saving his son's family some food, but the snake felt a sudden, sharp sense of urgency. Death is a bitter thing. He had no intention of dying a second time, and so, the white snake began to desperately absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. A few more years slipped by until we encounter a truly bizarre situation, though he wasn't sure exactly when it all began. Other giant snakes started invading his territory constantly, and even though he used his superior size to roughly toss them out, another one would simply appear the very next day, leaving him too annoyed to focus on his cultivation. Finally, having run out of options, he decided to see what the ancient human world actually looked like, but he didn't expect this. Once again, he was about to witness the harsh reality of mortality. 2 days later, he reached the woods bordering a small village. His first impression of the settlement was its sheer poverty, with nothing but dilapidated thatched huts scattered beneath the hillside. There were many rice fields by the creek, but even the scrawny yellow dogs running along the ridges couldn't find a single mouse. He intended to take a quick look and return to the deep mountains, but before leaving, he happened to meet a young girl. She was about 6 or 7, with her hair in pigtails and wearing a faded coarse skirt, skipping happily toward the back of the hill. She was there to catch butterflies and pick flowers. Usually, this area was safe and devoid of any dangerous animals. Today, however, a lame old wolf was prowling nearby, and the little girl froze in terror as it approached. With incredible speed, our snake coiled around the wolf and constricted his muscles until he felt its bones snap. The girl sat on the ground, staring blankly at him and the wolf for a long time before finally speaking out of curiosity. She asked if he was the snake immortal from the back mountains, which left him feeling quite speechless. He hadn't expected those old legends to still carry weight today, so he flicked his tongue twice to signal that she was right. The girl's mouth formed a perfect "oh" in surprise as she asked if he could understand her, and he nodded once more. She was even more astonished. A giant snake that could understand human speech was a truly magical thing to behold. She thought for a moment and then asked, with a hint of hesitation, if he was going to eat her. Her father had told her that all wild beasts in the mountains eat people, but our snake simply shook his head. He was tempted to nod just to scare her, but after being alone in the mountains for so long, he finally had someone to talk to. If he scared her away, he wouldn't easily find another companion. Soon, the girl's innocence was on full display as she began to shout with joy. Before he could even react, she actually ran over and used her small hands to stroke his scales, remarking on how beautiful they were. She claimed they looked better than her family's large ceramic tiles, and just like that, our snake, who had intended to return to the mountains, stayed. He remained near the village, where the little girl, named Yuner, often came to chat with him, even curling up on his back for a nap when she was tired. A few months slipped by in this peaceful manner until one day, Yuner ran to him and sat on his back, looking completely dejected. She whispered that she was so hungry, explaining that the village head had taken all the grain from her family's home. He claimed it was for the yellow grain tax, but Yuner was starving. Deep down, he understood exactly what was happening here. In this era, the common folk were ruled by clans, where the village head and elders acted like local emperors of their small domain. Whether it was dividing land or settling disputes, they held absolute power, a reality where the central law rarely reached these remote corners. If the village head and elders, as the leaders of the main lineage, used every means to hoard money and food, the poor had no way to resist. After thinking it over, he turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving the girl behind for a moment. Under Yuner's expectant gaze, he eventually emerged dragging a small wild boar, causing the girl's eyes to light up instantly. She asked if it was a gift for her, and when he nodded, Yuner's eyes curved into happy little crescents. She ran home shouting with joy all the way, but by the next day, rumors of this event began to spread wildly through the village. Having finally found something to eat, Yuner's father wasn't stingy. After butchering the boar, he shared the meat with several other starving families. These villagers lived on the edge of the great mountains, and they knew that only by sticking together could they hope to survive. At first, everyone simply said that Yuner had incredible luck, but once the wild boar meat was finally finished, the luck continued. Yuner found 2 more mountain pheasants in the back hills, which started to make her parents feel that something was rather strange. They didn't say much at first, until the day the food ran out again, and Yuner somehow returned home dragging a whole wolf. Now the villagers couldn't sit still. How could a little girl possibly find a full-grown wild wolf just lying around? And so, the whispers grew. On the hillside, dozens of villagers gathered around the wolf carcass, whispering in confusion, while Yuner stood in the center, head bowed in silence. While this food had helped the village survive a crisis, the situation was becoming far too strange. If things went poorly, they might very well label Yuner a demon and burn her at the stake. Her father demanded to know how she found the wolf. Yuner simply looked down and fidgeted with her fingers, refusing to speak. He pressed her again, asking who had delivered it. He wondered aloud if it was some wandering hero passing through their village, a daxia, as her father called them. He was referring to those martial artists who roamed the world, but Yuner only shook her head. To be honest, she was terrified. Her father warned her that she must tell the truth, or he would stop treating her as his daughter. A neighbor tried to intervene, but Yuner's father waved them off. He stared coldly at the girl, thinking to himself that if she didn't speak soon, he would have no choice but to use the broom on her. He likely didn't realize how much his words were hurting her. For a 7 or 8-year-old girl, this was the harshest possible scolding, and Yuner was instantly overcome with panic. She remembered how much her parents doted on her brother while treating her with cold indifference, and the fear began to grow. She was terrified her family would truly abandon her. She still remembered her mother harshly calling her a money-losing burden. With a loud wail, Yuner burst into tears and finally confessed everything. Meanwhile, hidden in the dense forest nearby, our snake sighed inwardly. After thinking it over, he decided to reveal himself to see how the villagers would react. Suddenly, someone shouted, "A white snake!" Everyone's gaze followed the man's pointing finger toward the edge of the woods. We see Yuner running forward while crying loudly, throwing her arms around the snake as her tears flowed like an endless stream. He flicked his tongue and let her rub against his back a few times to comfort her. Having made his presence known, He turned and slithered back into the forest, taking a long detour to another side to observe the ongoing situation. Only after seeing that the villagers didn't harm Yunner did he finally put his heart at ease. Soon, legends of a snake immortal began to spread. Some villagers even brought yellow paper and candles to the spot where he appeared, offering prayers of thanks for the food he provided. They prayed for good weather and bountiful harvests, which was one thing, but then things took a turn for the absurd. Some even prayed to find a good husband, as if a snake could manage that. Over the following days, our snake continued to provide the village with wild game, but this peaceful arrangement was not destined to last. The strange prosperity of this mountain village soon attracted unwanted attention. We see Yunner running toward the back hills, shouting as she goes. She urged the great snake to run, warning him that people were coming to capture him for money, including many hunters. There were even men on horseback, and her father had sent her to warn him to flee. He nodded in understanding. As he turned to slither deep into the mountains, Yunner finally breathed a sigh of relief and waved goodbye. Meanwhile, the village had become crowded with outsiders, mostly hunters and armed servants carrying heavy blades. Word of the snake had reached a local magistrate, who immediately gathered a team to personally lead a hunt into the mountains. The villagers knelt in the dirt, begging the magistrate to spare their snake immortal, but they were met only with lashes from a whip. Eventually, the magistrate bribed a few locals to act as guides, and the hunting party marched grandly into the wilderness. A white snake is a rare sight, especially one as large and intelligent as our friend here. A true prize, indeed. Whether sold or given as a gift, he represented a fortune, but these men had forgotten the terrifying reputation of the Great Mountains. The magistrate urged them on, certain they were close to catching the beast. To be honest, his confidence was misplaced. He promised rewards for everyone once the snake was caught, as the group slowly made their way through the valley. Watching them from a distance, our snake began to move, intentionally leaving behind a heavy, lingering scent for them to follow. As the hounds grew increasingly agitated, a look of excitement crossed the magistrate's face. But as they entered the deeper forest, the surroundings became eerily quiet. There were no birds singing, no sounds of animals, not even a single mouse. It was total silence. This unnatural stillness made the hunting dogs restless and fearful, yet the hunters at the front soon made a discovery. The magistrate rode forward to find his men gathered around several strange, massive pillars of earth that stood taller than a man. Gathered together in various sizes, the men realized that everything they had seen along the path was just like this. The magistrate felt instinctively uneasy, and just as he was about to order the group to pick up the pace, he had no idea that on a distant slope, our snake had already coiled his tail around a massive boulder and hurled it forward. The rock slammed heavily into one of the earth pillars with a loud crash, shattering a small piece of the structure. When nothing else happened, the crowd froze in confusion, suspecting an ambush and huddling together for protection. They remained tense for a long time, never imagining that if they had simply turned and run the moment that rock landed, they might have actually survived. But now, it was far too late. In the next moment, the earth pillar burst like a spring, spewing out a dark stream of thumb-sized ants that instantly transformed the ground into a black, swarming ocean. The ants quickly overwhelmed the greedy hunters. Our snake left without looking back, and the few who escaped eventually went mad. Once again, the Great Mountains used blood to prove their terrifying reputation. We see that of the dozens who entered, fewer than 10 survived. Now, even the herb gatherers dared not enter, and at the same time, the villagers realized something. They saw that our snake's intelligence was quite high. He was a master of redirection, and their fear of him grew even deeper. He knew he couldn't interact with Yunner too much without affecting her life, so he decided to return deep into the mountains. It wasn't until 9 years later that he returned to the village outskirts. Perhaps it was fate, for as soon as he arrived, he saw a beautiful figure standing there in a daze. The little girl had grown up, but her scent remained unchanged. Ignoring the calluses on her hands from years of work, Yunner was quite elegant, with long hair reaching down to her waist. In the countryside, she was truly a top-tier beauty. Sensing something, Yunner turned and saw the long-lost white figure. Just as she did as a child, Yunner ran over and hugged the white snake, laughing and crying all at once. She asked where he had been for all these years. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle above, Yunner sat on the grass leaning against him, her large eyes watching the stars alongside his vertical pupils. It was a peaceful sight. Her vision hadn't improved much despite her efforts, but that didn't stop her from putting on a brave face as she told him she was getting married. She spoke of Brother Wang, a kind man from the village whom she truly liked, yet she confessed she didn't want to marry him. Last month, a wealthy man named Guo Yuanwei visited and decided to take her as a concubine, despite her knowing such a position held no status. Guo Yuanwei was 40, the same age as her father. The village was drowning in poverty, and Brother Wang's family was just as poor. Every year they survived on grass roots and tree bark, while Guo Yuanwei lived a different life, one where meat was served every single day. She simply didn't want to be hungry anymore. As she spoke, Yunner became visibly overwhelmed by her own emotions. Taking a deep breath, she told him she was leaving in 2 days and asked our white snake if he would see her off. He nodded his head in agreement. Under the brilliant starlight of the hillside, her soft weeping echoed far into the night. On the wedding day, there were no drums or banquets. Only a small sedan chair arrived to carry Yunner away. She took only a small bundle of belongings, while her parents wept bitter tears, struggling to let go of their daughter's hand. On a nearby hill, a young man knelt and wailed in despair. This was the Brother Wang that Yunner had mentioned. He cursed his own uselessness for not being able to provide for her, while perhaps also hating Guo Yuanwei for taking a good girl away. But there was nothing he could do except watch the sedan carry off the girl he loved. Inside that small carriage, Yunner lifted the curtain with one hand, her eyes searching the rice fields until they found a long, familiar white figure. A beautiful smile broke through her tear-stained face. Perhaps she felt she had failed Brother Wang, who loved her so deeply. Perhaps becoming an old man's concubine was a mistake, but what did it matter? Fate had tormented her for over a decade. She didn't want to starve to death just to save a few grains for others. She simply wanted to live without the constant ache of hunger. One could only blame the world and this cruel fate. Our snake followed the sedan chair all the way to a manor outside the town. He climbed a large tree to watch from a distance as the sedan entered through the back gate. A concubine's status is low, after all. She had no right to enter through the main gate, nor to have a proper ceremony or a wedding feast. Such was the life of a concubine. To be honest, she was little more than a plaything to them. Our snake watched from the tree for a long time, until the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Only when the manor lanterns were lit did he turn to leave, returning to the vast mountains while offering a silent prayer for the girl he once knew. He couldn't help but wonder if Yuner, who had spent her entire life in the simple mountains, was truly prepared for what came next. Could she really survive the schemes and backstabbing of a wealthy household? Witnessing her fate, he began to practice his cultivation with even greater intensity. He hoped that one day, his destiny would no longer be controlled by others. But he never expected that a year later, a figure would come stumbling into the valley. The man's clothes were torn and his body was covered in scratches, yet he continued to run like a man possessed. Our snake felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread. His senses told him that this frantic man was none other than Brother Wong. Brother Wong stumbled right in front of him, gasping out for the snake immortal, desperate for help. He begged him to save Yuner. Upon hearing that cry, our snake instantly transformed into a streak of white light and raced back toward the world outside. We returned to that same hillside, where Yuner's parents and the villagers were gathered around a girl who was drawing her final, shallow breaths. As his white form appeared, the crowd fell to their knees in unison. Yuner, lying on a thin mat, looked up and saw him. A pale smile drifted across her face, a smile so relaxed, yet so heartbreakingly beautiful. Her body was covered in horrific bruises, clearly the result of a brutal beating with heavy clubs. Yuner's mother knelt in desperate hope, pleading with the snake immortal to save her daughter's life. But unfortunately, he was no healer. The blows had been too cruel, damaging her internal organs beyond the reach of any medicine. The sound of weeping grew louder. In their eyes, if the great snake said there was no hope, then all was truly lost. Yuner waved a weak hand, whispering that there was no need for more trouble. She had one final wish for the great snake. She simply wanted to lie upon him and watch the sky and the drifting clouds. He nodded his head in silent consent. His tail gently coiled around her frail body, lifting her onto his back and forming a protective circle to hold her steady. She looked up at the sky and whispered a final thank you. And just like that, Yuner was gone, showing us how life can be so fragile, yet so strong. Life can be both fleeting and eternal. We returned to that quiet hillside where our snake remained coiled, resting beside the fresh earth. He watched over the spot where Yuner lay. She had left her mountain village only to return here in the end. This was where she truly belonged. Brother Wong sat before the grave, his voice trembling as he muttered about how poorly Yuner had been treated in that wealthy manor. That old man hadn't treated her like a human being, and the first wife bullied her daily, beating her without cause. She had missed home terribly. But Master Guo refused to let her go. A few days ago, he tried to give her away to Lord Zhao, and Yuner had resisted with all her might. Our snake could not show facial expressions, but he felt a cold fury within. That night, Brother Wong picked up his wood-cutting blade. One man and one snake set off toward the town. He wasn't afraid of killing, nor of the karmic consequences. Those people had murdered Yuner. He had every right to seek vengeance for her. A snake's life shouldn't be lived in cowardice. That night, inside the Guo family estate, aside from the laborers and the low-ranking servants, not a single soul was left alive. Every wound bore the mark of a snake's strike. He used very little venom, as a tiny drop is enough to kill a grown man. To be honest, he didn't want this incident to bring trouble to young Wong. He doubted anyone would dare enter the great mountains to hunt a snake. After returning to the village, Brother Wong told Yuner that her death had been avenged and that he would eventually find a wife and start a family. The next day, the local magistrate investigated the Guo estate and then visited Yuner's grave, where he saw our snake standing guard with his own eyes. After learning the whole story, the magistrate felt deeply that even the beasts of the mountains have hearts. As for the killings, and so, the matter was simply brushed aside. Some tried to demand action from the local officials, only to be met with a cold, dismissive silence. The magistrate's stance was simple. If you want justice, do it yourself. He was more than happy to tell them exactly where the white snake lived. But as soon as they remembered what had happened to the Guo family, everyone grew very quiet. No one, it seemed, was that brave. Our snake had no interest in their politics. He knew that once a life is extinguished, it is gone. With Yuner no longer there, he lost all desire to see the outside world. He decided to stay within his own territory and focus solely on his cultivation. Time flows like water, and years passed in the blink of an eye. One day, he began the slow process of shedding his old skin once again. His body had grown to a staggering 8 meters, making him a true behemoth of the forest. And yet, even within his own territory, he found himself facing another battle for survival. His opponent was a gray wolf that had gained spiritual sentience and begun to cultivate. The wolf sought to devour powerful prey to increase its own strength. Consequently, after learning of our snake's existence, it began to provoke him incessantly. At first, he tried to avoid the conflict, hoping the wolf would simply move on to another target. But the wolf mistook his patience for weakness. Eventually, he decided it was time to put an end to that wretched creature once and for all. After some preparation, the wolf returned, salivating at the prospect of a fight. In the predator's eyes, our snake was nothing more than a prime piece of meat that would make him stronger. He didn't even care where the battle took place. The two beasts faced off without any hesitation or testing. From the very first strike, it was a desperate struggle to the death. He intentionally left a gap in his defense, using his own massive body as bait to lure the gray wolf closer. The moment the wolf's jaws clamped down, he injected his venom directly into its back. The wolf's teeth were as sharp as needles, tearing into him until he was covered in blood. The scent of gore drove the wolf into a frenzy, but it only awakened our snake's own wild instincts. Finally, he dragged the wolf into a deep pool. The moment they hit the water, the wolf knew its fate was sealed. In the water, the beast had no way to fight back. The struggle seemed brief, but in reality, over half an hour had passed. Exhausted and suffering from heavy blood loss, he began to hurriedly devour the wolf's flesh to recover his strength. As he swallowed the pure, potent wolf blood, a burning heat spread through his belly. Combined with his severe injuries, he eventually lost consciousness. His massive form began to drift slowly downstream with the current. Meanwhile, near a small thatched cottage, a wooden door creaked open. A kind-looking, white-haired grandmother stepped outside. She carried a wooden basin full of clothes toward the stream, followed by a playful little yellow puppy that had only recently been weaned. Suddenly, the little dog began to bark frantically at the water's edge. The grandmother didn't think much of it at first, until she reached the bank. There, she saw a massive, divine shadow lurking in the shallow water. With a loud thud, her basin hit the ground, and she fell to her knees. She immediately fell to her knees and began to kowtow, crying out that a divine dragon had fallen from the heavens. This grandmother, who had never seen much of the world, truly believed he was a fallen deity. Little did she know that as she spoke those words, a strange energy began to pour into the depths of our snake's weakened soul. He didn't realize it yet, but this was the legendary bestowal of names, a stroke of fate every spirit dreams of. After finishing her prayers, the grandmother rolled up her sleeves and worked tirelessly to pull his massive body from the freezing water. Being submerged for so long had caused his body temperature to plummet, leaving him with very little vitality remaining. By dragging him out to bask in the sun, she unintentionally accelerated his recovery, seeing he was still unresponsive. However, the kind woman brought out an incense burner to light before him and even gathered a large pile of rice stalks. She tucked the straw under his head for comfort. A few days later, when he finally opened his eyes, the first things he saw were the incense burner, the grandmother kneeling in prayer, and a yapping little puppy. In that moment, he felt a strange, fated connection, a deep sense that he must repay her. So he nodded 3 times in thanks. The grandmother prayed for the dragon to bless the harvest and for her late husband to find a good life in his next reincarnation. But the paths of humans and spirits rarely stay joined for long. He knew he couldn't stay here forever. He eventually slithered back into the forest, but he didn't go far. He felt he owed this old woman a debt of gratitude. Living alone, she surely faced many hardships, and he decided he would provide help whenever the timing was right. He recalled the ancient myths of the white snake, where powerful demons who could control the weather sought to repay favors. In those stories, they often ended up marrying the humans, a prospect he found quite terrifying, to be honest. Surely saving her life in return would be enough. There was no need to make things so unnecessarily complicated. And so, he settled in the woods near her home. Half a year later, this paradise far from the city faced a sudden catastrophe. As they say, all great things that are united must eventually fall apart. The raging fires of war eventually reached the edge of the great mountains, and the government began forcibly conscripting every able-bodied man. Landlords seized the chance to annex property and raise taxes, while self-proclaimed heroes used the chaos to launch their own violent uprisings. The impoverished village was soon drained of its strength, as several rounds of conscription took away every young man over the age of 15. With only the elderly and women remaining, the defenseless mountain village naturally became a prime target for roaming bandits. One day, our snake was navigating with his usual poor vision until he finally managed to crawl up the slope behind the village. Using his infrared sensing, he saw the village was on fire. Many humans were loitering and pillaging. The bandits had finally arrived. Banditry, that ancient and grim profession, was quite a prosperous business in these times. It seemed almost anyone could join in. In a world of chaos, they thrived like fish in water, living freely and without consequence. If their luck held out, they might even be recruited by the government and become local officials. Thinking of this, he twisted his massive body through the brush. He parted the tall grass to reach the grandmother's house, just as the arrogant bandits were swaggering toward her front door. They suddenly came face to face with a massive white snake rising up on its tail. Before they could even scream or turn to run, he snatched one up in his jaws and tossed him aside with a violent flick. A monster, one of them shrieked as the cry echoed out. The remaining bandits fled in a blind panic, but behind him, the grandmother suddenly dropped to her knees once again. She wept bitterly, pressing her face to the ground. "O divine dragon above," she cried out through her tears. "Please, I beg of you, save our village. We simply cannot survive this on our own anymore." Imagine the scene, a white-haired woman kneeling in the dirt, sobbing in desperation. It was a truly heartbreaking sight to behold. He couldn't understand why the world was filled with such suffering. After a moment of thought, however, he shook his head. There were so many bandits, all armed with swords and bows. If he charged in blindly, he might just end up killed himself. He decided it was best to simply protect his benefactor. Being a hero isn't easy, and besides, he was just a snake. The fact that he wasn't eating humans was already a kindness, so he stayed coiled protectively at the grandmother's door. As we watch the black smoke billowing from the village, he suddenly turns and flees with every ounce of strength he can muster. He retreats toward the great mountains in a frantic rush, because just a moment ago, he confirmed a terrifying truth. This world is a realm of cultivation, a place where both demons and powerful cultivators truly exist. His infrared sensing clearly detected people flying through the air. Yes, actually flying, which, naturally, changed everything. Then, the heat signatures representing the lives of those bandits began to cool down one by one. That drop in temperature wasn't from a fever. It was the chilling cold that comes only with death. Those who can fly are immortals, and immortals have a well-known habit of hunting down monsters like him. He has no choice but to run for his life, a white streak flashing through the forest as he dives deep into the mountains. Even so, the unease in the white snake's soul doesn't fade. To stay alive, he doesn't dare relax for even a second. As he flees, a pair of beautiful eyes watches from outside the mountains as the white shadow scales the rugged peaks. He crosses streams and follows the river that flows from the mountains, escaping toward the upper reaches of the water. When an animal senses danger, its first instinct is to return to its burrow, and our snake is no different. He plans to hide at the bottom of a deep pool for weeks if necessary, unaware that someone is watching him from above. In fact, someone is following his desperate escape with great interest. 3 people stand atop a flying sword in the sky. Two children cling tightly to a woman who appears to be about 30 years old. She is strikingly beautiful. She looks like a goddess from the highest heavens, but the young boy points at the white snake below and huffs. Master, hurry and kill it, he demands. The two children, a boy and a girl, appear to be about 10 years old. Carrying precious swords, they look like divine attendants from a myth. The woman simply smiles and asks why she should kill him. The boy argues that this white worm is terrorizing the human world in broad daylight and must be stopped. He believes only its death can satisfy the people's anger. But then, we must ask, what kind of people was he actually killing? The boy argues that the snake was naturally killing villagers, and if they hadn't arrived so early, that poor old woman would have met a tragic end. He tells his master to ask his junior sister if she doesn't believe him. The young boy looks toward the little girl, who thinks for a moment and nods. The woman simply shakes her head in wonder. She tells them that reading 10,000 books isn't as good as traveling 10,000 miles, as what we see isn't always the truth. She realizes she must take them down the mountain more often, as not all humans are good, and medicine isn't always for evil. The bandits' rampage was the true evil. The white snake killed those wicked men without harming a single innocent villager. She asks them which is truly more hateful, that snake or those bandits who were filled with nothing but malice. The two little ones lower their heads in silence, though deep down, they still can't accept the idea of a good monster. The woman seems to know exactly what her disciples are thinking, reminding them to always think twice before acting. She warns them not to let appearances blind them. Since the white snake has returned to its nest, they decide to go down and see. We return to our snake, who has finally made it back to the valley. He gasps for air, relieved that the constant flight is over. His physical strength is completely spent, leaving him with an unspeakable exhaustion as he skillfully climbs the ancient tree. He has climbed these branches so often that the wood has become polished and smooth. The world outside is far too dangerous for him. He makes up his mind. Even if the outside world were paved with gold, he wouldn't go back. He's staying right here. From midair, the three of them watch the somewhat disheveled white snake with amusement. The woman begins to survey the surroundings. While this isn't exactly a legendary paradise, it is a fine place with a decent amount of spiritual energy. It possesses a refined aura, the kind where spirits are left in peace, more than enough for a small, enlightened demon to practice. The deep pool in the valley and the surrounding mountain peaks form what looks like a rough, giant spiritual array. That ancient tree is the very heart of the formation. It seems the white snake has some luck. Then, in a flash of movement, the three of them suddenly appear on a large rock beneath the tree. The young girl leans over, her eyes filled with curiosity. She reaches out to touch the massive rock, polished smooth by the white snake's scales, leaving our little friend utterly stunned. He wonders if these three are immortals or powerful cultivators. Having his secret nest discovered so suddenly, he doesn't know whether to run, or if he should continue pretending to be an ordinary beast. In his panic, his body acts on pure survival instinct. He coils up, baring his two sharp, venomous fangs as he issues a desperate warning hiss. The woman is undeniably beautiful, though he thinks to himself that she would be much lovelier if she weren't smiling directly at him. She remarks that for a small snake who has only just begun gathering chi, his intelligence is remarkably high and quite interesting. Having just arched his body into an attacking stance, he immediately abandons all thoughts of resistance upon hearing her voice. He slides down the trunk to the ground and coils himself tightly, pressing his head and body against the earth to beg for mercy. What else could he do, really? He can see their precious swords hovering in midair. These are true sword immortals, after all. He keeps his head down, not daring to move, hoping these powerful figures won't take a lowly snake like him seriously. Through his keen sense of smell, he realizes someone has walked right up to him, yet he feels no vibration from the ground. It goes without saying that her power is immense, reaching the level of treading on snow without a trace. And remember, there are three of them. Yet he can only sense the two children. As for the woman, he can only determine her direction through his sense of smell. The woman observes the white snake, noting he looks ordinary, yet possesses a certain uniqueness, like a common beast with a hidden spark. Usually, wild spirits and mountain monsters lack high intelligence, but this white snake is exceptionally clever. She saw his shock and bewilderment when they appeared, followed by his quick attempt to flee and then play dumb. And then, after a single word from her, he immediately dropped to the ground in total submission. It is all very amusing to her. Soon, an interesting idea takes root in the woman's mind, and she asks the little snake if he would like to follow her up the mountain. She suggests he could become a guardian beast. To be honest, she hadn't planned this, having come here purely out of curiosity. It was meant to be a way to pass the time between her cultivation sessions, and not just because the white snake is so unusually smart. But there are countless intelligent spirits in this world. What truly made her change her mind was the white snake's exquisite, smooth, and beautiful scales. After all, people are naturally drawn to beautiful things. It is like seeing a stunning bracelet and wanting to own it. The little snake looks up at the woman, noticing her admiring gaze fixed on his scales, and he has no choice but to nod in agreement. If he refused, even though he can tell she isn't a bad person, he worries she might decide she wants a snakeskin robe instead. The two children don't mind at all. In fact, they think having a snake around might be quite fun. There is no need for many words with a low-level spirit snake, so the woman simply waves her long sleeve and pulls him inside. His vision goes black as he faints. Yes, he's been treated like a mere object. When he finally wakes up again, he finds himself standing halfway up a majestic, towering mountain. The first thing he sees is a massive rock, standing 7 stories tall, with 3 powerful characters carved into it. Mount Shenhua. Mount Shenhua pierces the sky, a peak of 1,000 winds that seems to divide the very heavens with its grandeur. He remembers visiting Mount Hua on Earth in his past life, but this mountain is far higher, larger. The snake realized he had encountered a true master. Initially, he had been quite resistant to the idea of being captured just to serve as a lowly gatekeeper. Now, however, it seemed his luck had turned. Having a powerful patron meant a better life, even if he only received the scraps the master threw away. Those mere leftovers would be enough to transform a simple serpent like himself. Meanwhile, the woman led her 2 young disciples onward. They chatted and laughed as they made their way up the mountain. The snake followed closely behind, slithering along the winding stone steps. Along the cliffside, waterfalls of all sizes cascaded everywhere. The pools below were so crystal clear that one could see every pebble within. The cliffs were steep and daunting, with peaks that seemed to pierce the very heavens. It was a landscape of sheer drops and majestic heights. Great halls were layered upon one another like a celestial palace. Stone bridges and long corridors connected the valleys, weaving the mountain together. Ancient pines grew stubbornly from giant boulders and beside the falls. Surrounded by mist and the sound of the wind, it was a truly breathtaking sight. A gentle breeze brushes past, revealing stone pavilions nestled within the sea of clouds. If one were to sit there now, with a jar of wine and a zither to play, it would truly be a paradise on earth. The snake looks up at the sky, noticing a massive formation slowly rotating above. It seems there is a reason they aren't flying up the mountain, but walking instead. The sky is likely a no-fly zone. Along the winding mountain paths, we occasionally see cultivators dressed in white and blue robes. Whether young or old, they all step aside to let the woman pass. As they travel, we begin to gather quite a bit of information. This place is the Chunyang Palace. The woman is Yu Rong, the junior sister of the sect leader herself. The young boy is Yang Mu, and the smaller girl is Su Ling. Both are Yu Rong's personal disciples. Word has it that Yu Rong only has these two students, despite countless people desperate to join her rank. To be honest, they are the lucky ones. It seems our little snake has found himself a very powerful patron. Soon, they arrive at a massive ancient archway guarded by a dozen men. The sight of them makes him feel deeply nervous, which, naturally, is a perfectly reasonable reaction for a small snake. He sees three characters filled with spiritual energy above the gate. For some reason, the moment he steps inside, the air feels exceptionally fresh. He continues to slither along behind the three of them, passing training grounds filled with disciples, exquisite halls, and a series of stone bridges and long corridors. Eventually, they reach a secluded and quiet palace perched right on the edge of a cliff. With a sea of clouds floating below and ancient pines standing guard, the hall feels vast and empty with only the three of them there. The white snake finally understands why he was brought here. She really does want him to guard the entrance, regardless of the job title. He no longer has to worry about becoming a designer handbag. There is no need for bowing or serving tea. And there is no grand ceremony. After all, catching a snake spirit to watch the door isn't exactly the same as taking an apprentice. Yu Rong tells him that this hall will be his new home, though he must also keep an eye on the nearby mountain shrines. She has already notified the kitchens and the internal affairs office. He can go to the dining hall for food, and furthermore, she warns him not to wander aimlessly into restricted areas where no one will be able to save his life. He simply nods in understanding. Seeing him act with such intelligence, Yu Rong feels quite satisfied. Without further delay, and regardless of whether he is watching, she begins instructing her two disciples in their cultivation. He pretends not to understand and finds a quiet corner in the hall. Coiling himself up, he begins to eavesdrop. Of the two disciples, Yang Mu is less than friendly, often shooting him angry glares. Little Su Ling, however, is incredibly mischievous, frequently reaching out to poke his face. Suddenly, he no longer has to worry about hunting, nor does he need to stay alert for predators. It is a bit of an adjustment, as this place is remarkably quiet and safe. Outside the hall, cranes spread their wings amidst the churning clouds. Inside, a white snake listens to secret teachings in broad daylight. And so, his life of cultivation begins. When he is bored, he wanders around the palace, scaring off mice and chasing away insects. Later, he heads to the open ground before the hall to watch the disciples train, or spends his mornings on the cliffside. He spends those mornings breathing in the mountain mists, often staring longingly at the jade bottle sitting on Yu Rong's table. It contains delicious spirit pills, though a mere snake isn't exactly qualified to eat them. 3 days pass in this manner. Between eavesdropping and wandering through the sect grounds, he keeps himself busy. When he tires, he returns to Yu Rong's palace, coiling around a massive rock at the cliff's edge to sleep. As for guarding the hall, he doesn't believe for a second there aren't protective arrays. We see that Yang Mu remains rigid and stiff, while Su Ling is a restless little girl who can never seem to sit still. Ever since the white snake arrived, Su Ling's eyes have been practically glowing with excitement, and she spends every spare moment playing with her new companion. Just now, having fallen asleep, he hears someone approaching. He opens his eyes and lifts his head to look. His poor vision eventually reveals Yu Rong walking toward him, but something feels off. Her expression is unusually stern. In a harsh tone, she demands to know why he is being so lazy and tells him to get to work immediately. This version of Yu Rong continues to scold the snake. He simply flicks his tongue a few times, lazily lowers his head, and goes back to sleep. Su Ling's voice rings out in frustration as she drops the illusion. She complains that he saw through her trick again, and it's no fun. As Su Ling reveals her true form, he feels a sense of quiet satisfaction, having seen through her trick almost instantly. Illusion magic, after all, only deceives the eyes, and Su Ling smells nothing like the elegant Yu Rong. His flickering tongue easily catches the scent markers in the air, and besides, his infrared vision tells a different story. Su Ling's small stature is quite obvious to him. Over the next few days, he wanders through the countless palaces of Mount Hua. Finally, he begins to understand the layout. Chunyang Palace was supposedly founded by a great being from the celestial realms. It serves as the guardian sect of the Great Tang Empire, boasting deep foundations and a staggering number of masters. Among those seeking immortality, it is the undisputed leader. We learn the sect is divided into 5 distinct branches. There is the Yushu branch under sect leader Li Xiangyan, and the branches of his 4 senior fellow disciples, Gutsong and Jinsu, Jiang Lin of Lingshu, Yun Zishu, and finally Yu Rong's own Qingshu branch. Each oversees their own territory. He currently resides in the Qingshu Palace. It seems nearly every child in the world grows up with the same dream: to enter Chunyang, practice cultivation, and seek eternal life. Unfortunately, talent is a rare and fickle thing. Only 1 in 10,000 can enter these gates. Those who do are the world's elite, the true geniuses of their generation. They are the type whose spiritual talent simply cannot be contained. As the leader of the righteous sects, Chunyang is deeply respected. They embody noble spirit and moral integrity, standing firm against evil cultivators and demons that plague the mortal world. Chunyang disciples often travel down the mountain to help, but most importantly for our snake. The people of Chunyang are so focused on their cultivation that they have little interest in the trivial affairs of the world. This is precisely why the mortal emperors named Chunyang the official guardian sect of the nation. He feels as though he has found the ultimate protector. It is, to be honest, the perfect place to live a lazy life. After all, who would dare cause trouble here? Yang Mu and Su Ling soon notice the lazy white snake has become quite active. In the forest surrounding the palace, not a single mouse or even a bedbug remains once the white snake passes through. The lingering scent of a snake alone is enough to send the local mice fleeing in absolute terror. It seems our white snake, supposedly just a hall guardian, is putting quite a lot of effort into tidying up the neighborhood. In the palace of the Qingshu branch, there are only 3 people, including Yurong, and, of course, 1 snake. Though he was brought here to guard the gate, he is treated more like a decorative pet than a sentry. With plenty of free time, he begins to wonder how to speed up his cultivation in this land of opportunity. For instance, he catches the thick scent of spiritual elixirs drifting over from the Lingshu branch, who specialize in alchemy. Their medical skills are legendary, and while many assume the disciples of the medicinal peak are weak in combat, they would be quite wrong. Alchemy requires a solid foundation and constant, disciplined practice. Because they save lives, they have friends everywhere, meaning they can get their hands on any sword or treasure they desire. He has set his sights on these wealthy Lingshu disciples, knowing full well just how rich these fellows truly are. To him, scavenging their scraps is like a low-level player finding the discarded treasures of a high-level master. What they consider trash is a literal fortune to him. Before the Lingshu main hall, on a lotus-shaped stone base, sits a massive, gourd-shaped alchemy furnace covered in arrays. He stares at the furnace, noting the bells hanging from its corners. Deep down, he is genuinely puzzled as to why an alchemy furnace would need copper bells. After watching for a while, without finding an answer, the white snake makes himself at home and heads toward the backyard. The 2 disciples guarding the hall don't even blink. News of the snake their martial aunt brought back has spread quickly. Most had expected a rare mythical beast, but seeing only an ordinary white snake, they quickly lost all interest. There is no real need to stop him, after all. He is just a pet snake looking for a few herbal scraps. He arrives outside the alchemy room, ignoring the curious stares of the Lingshu disciples who have gathered to watch. He coils himself up in a prime spot and waits patiently, knowing that in alchemy, failure is always a possibility. The resulting waste from failed batches is unfit for consumption, as these discarded pills are often toxic and can cause severe reactions. Usually, they are collected, logged, and thrown away, but now they have found a rather unexpected new purpose. A disciple looks at the latest batch of failed pills, logs them with his brush, and sets them aside for our white snake. He figures the snake is actually quite useful, saving him the trouble of disposal, though he truly can't imagine why anyone would eat them. While these toxic scraps are useless to humans, to our snake, they are a literal feast of spiritual supplements. Toxicity is a relative term, after all, and thanks to his keen sense of smell, he can easily tell which are safe to eat. He opens his mouth wide and, with a single powerful breath, sucks a dozen failed pills right off the porcelain plate. After that, he coils his body back up to wait leisurely, having truly mastered the art of efficient consumption. He has been scavenging at the Lingshu Palace for nearly a month now, and his cultivation level is rising at an incredible pace. 2 female cultivators approach and pull out a couple of low-quality pills that didn't quite make the grade before handing them over. They call him Big White as they offer the treats. He scoffs inwardly at the name, but still obediently opens his mouth to eat. To a human, a low-quality pill means insufficient efficacy, but to him, it is a top-tier supplement for his growth. After waiting through 2 more batches of failed pills and a box of herbal scraps, he finishes his meal and slithers away. His cultivation has been skyrocketing lately, fueled by the steady diet of discarded pills and the girl's half-finished experiments. Once the energy is fully absorbed, his entire body feels refreshed and brimming with newfound power. He feels so strong that if he encountered that wolf demon again, he wouldn't even need his venom or the advantage of the water. He is certain he could simply crush the life out of him on the spot. He returns to the Qingshu Palace, ignoring the 2 children still training hard. He coils himself around an ancient pine tree at the edge of the cliff, remaining perfectly still as he digests the contents of his stomach. Strands of medicinal energy begin to flow through his veins and spread across his body. This particular digestion takes an entire day. When he wakes the next morning, he feels a strange tightness across his skin. He knows, of course, that it is time to shed once again. While practicing her swordsmanship, Su Ling catches a glimpse of the great snake coiled around the ancient pine and notices something feels quite off. She immediately stops her training and rushes forward to investigate, calling out for her master in a sudden panic. Yang Mu follows, looking at the white snake with a confused expression, sensing that something about its appearance has indeed changed. Their master, Yurong, is forced to open his eyes from his deep meditation when he hears the urgent cries of his disciples. Su Ling cries out that something is terribly wrong and that Big White is dying, her vision blurring with tears of worry. In the blink of an eye, the master brings her to the edge of the cliff. She points at the white snake, her voice trembling with anxiety. Big White's scales have turned dull and his eyes have gone completely white, but Yurong simply raises a hand to calm her down. After a careful and serious observation, he speaks softly, telling them not to worry because the snake is actually doing perfectly fine. He suggests that the creature is merely undergoing a transformation, a revelation that allows Su Ling to finally breathe a sigh of relief. Yang Mu remains as silent and cold as ever, though he can't help but wonder what exactly the snake has been eating lately. He suspects it isn't just natural talent. The snake's cultivation speed is far too fast, as if he's been consuming something extraordinary. This surge in vitality and power is undeniable, leading Yu Rong to cast a suspicious glance toward his two young students. He asks them sternly if they have been secretly feeding their own cultivation pills or medicinal herbs to the snake. Su Ling and Yang Mu exchange an awkward look before insisting they have it, explaining that Big White has only been visiting the Lingshu Palace. They mention he has been eating the failed pills and herbal scraps managed by senior brother Du, a rather resourceful diet, to be honest. Upon hearing this, Yu Rong's mouth twitches. With his vast experience, he quickly realizes the hidden logic behind the snake's growth. Human digestion simply cannot compare to a snake's. What we consider toxic waste is, for him, a concentrated spiritual feast. After all, those ingredients were originally meant to boost a cultivator's power or heal grievous wounds. They are incredibly potent. Eating a whole bowl of that is a recipe for evolution, and now the three of them watch our snake intently as he begins to stir. Before long, he starts moving against the rough bark of the pine tree, rubbing his head against the sharp edges to loosen his old skin. Soon, the scales around the mouth begin to peel back, revealing the fresh, new skin hidden beneath. Using a branch to snag the old skin, he struggles to break free. First the head emerges, followed slowly by the rest of his body. The process is steady and agonizingly slow, and our three usually idle cultivators find themselves completely transfixed. They stand at the cliff's edge, watching intently, knowing that for a snake, every shedding is a brush with death. If he fails to shed completely, it means certain death. To be honest, it takes over an hour of grueling effort. When the tip of the tail finally slides out of the old casing, Su Ling claps her hands in pure delight. Even Yu Rong allows a thoughtful smile to cross his face, feeling a strange shift within himself for some reason. After witnessing the entire process, his own mental state feels subtly elevated. The act of casting off the old skin resonates with him. It is a rebirth, leaving the discarded husk behind on the ancient pine tree as a testament to growth. The snake falls into a deep sleep, and by the time he wakes, he has grown to a staggering 9 meters in length. Within this famous sect, he has found his own rhythm, breathing in the morning mists and visiting the kitchens when hungry. He frequents the Lingshu Palace to scavenge for spiritual treats to boost his cultivation, then returns to the Qingshu Palace to nap. His days are incredibly leisurely, though Su Ling notices he has recently started spending a lot of time at Taiji Square. Taiji Square is where the disciples of Chunyang Palace practice their martial arts. From high above, it is quite a sight. The square is designed as a massive bagua diagram, with a giant yin-yang fish swirling at its very center. The area is vast, at least the size of 10 football fields, likely created by some ancient master leveling a mountain peak with pure power. Thousands of disciples practice their swordsmanship here, filling the air with a vast and overwhelming sword intent. It feels like the mountains, the sea, and the wind combined. Some practice complex formations while others refine individual techniques. Practicing here allows one to absorb the surrounding energy and observe the superior techniques of the senior brothers. When their hands get itchy for action, they spar with one another or gather to discuss the finer points of the sword. Occasionally, they turn their heads to look at the white snake nearby. To be honest, he really is just there to steal their secrets. While Taiji Square is for low-level disciples, there are other exclusive areas where the high-ranking cultivators go to refine their power. He knows that if he went there now, he wouldn't understand a thing, so he sticks to Taiji Square to master the vital basics. After staying there for a long while, we see him move towards Wulong Peak, where the new disciples enter and leave the mountain gates. Besides practicing sword techniques at the square, they must come to Zwolong Peak to meditate and learn how to circulate their inner energy. To truly enter the world of cultivation, one must master this peak, which is vast and covered in various open clearings and stone platforms. Waterfalls flow past ceremonial swords, adding to the immortal atmosphere, and right at the very summit of Zwolong Peak, there is a discovery. We find a massive boulder at the top, as large as a basketball court, with an ancient stone pavilion standing quietly at its edge. An old peach tree stands before the pavilion, and only those with the most exceptional talent are permitted to practice on this boulder. These are the true geniuses among the disciples, often joined by sect elders or those with incredibly high levels of cultivation. They come here to resolve doubts and give lectures. Occasionally, even the sect leader himself arrives to guide the disciples' progress. Naturally, Yurong comes here to teach as well, while Yang Mu and Su Ling have become regular fixtures of this high-altitude classroom. Today, an elder is leading the lesson. And remember, an elder isn't necessarily an old man, but simply someone who has reached a certain height. One young disciple, barely 5 or 6 years old, finds his curiosity getting the better of him during the lecture. He keeps glancing at the massive white snake coiled in the peach tree, whose head hangs low as if he is actually paying attention. This training ground for geniuses has become our snake's latest target for eavesdropping, his tongue flicking out habitually as he listens. He is working hard to memorize these scriptures, verses that sounded familiar once, but which he had never truly studied before. Those young disciples have no idea just how much luck and destiny a simple snake requires to even attempt the path of cultivation. The mere act of unlocking one's intelligence is a shackle that bars the way for the vast majority of wild animals. Without a master or a method, cultivation is nearly impossible. Now that he has this chance, he intends to give it everything he has. Naturally, he must give it his all and memorize everything, for the path to immortality is incredibly treacherous. The only thing he can do is climb upward with all his might. By the time the red sun sets, he has learned much. Twisting his massive body, he returns to Lingshu Palace, needing to spend the night digesting and integrating these new lessons. After absorbing so much that day and breathing in the morning mist the next, he treats himself to a rare late sleep. At mealtime, he wanders toward the dining hall, where the cook has likely prepared some meat, though the quality is average at best. Still, the fact that it's a free meal satisfies him. Upon reaching the hall, he familiarly slithers toward the back area. He enjoys a basin of meat alone, while in the front hall, the chatting disciples suddenly fall silent. The sect's second senior brother, Lien Tianxing, enters with a dark expression, and everyone is suddenly afraid to even breathe. They are terrified of offending the moody Lian Tianxing, who, as it turns out, hasn't actually come here to eat. Instead, he is looking for a way to vent his frustration, but seeing the disciples behaving so perfectly, he finds no excuse. He decides to head to the back kitchen to find a reason to lose his temper. The stout head cook sees him approaching, and his face immediately turns bitter with worry. Right then, Lian Tianxing's eyes snap toward the back courtyard. His cold gaze lands directly on our snake. He turns to the man in charge and demands to know why Manager Zhang is so careless. He asks how he could possibly allow a beast into the kitchen, leaving Manager Zhang sweating as he tries to explain. Our snake rears up, letting out a warning hiss. He simply cannot stand by and watch this happen. He refuses to let Manager Zhang suffer because of him. Doubting this coffin face, Lian would actually dare to kill him. Lian Tianxing shouts that the beast is looking for death. He truly is a madman, something our snake hadn't quite believed until now. But as he watches the man swing a powerful palm strike toward him, the reality of the situation finally sinks in. He realizes that Lian Tianxing is indeed very unlikable, and deep down, he slightly regrets his earlier provocation. With a single strike aimed at a low-level snake spirit, there is a sudden, deafening boom. The 9-meter-long white snake is sent crashing through the kitchen doors and windows, skidding straight into the main dining hall and flipping 3 tables. He finally stops after crushing several disciples. Shaking his head to clear the dizziness, our snake tastes the unmistakable metallic tang of blood. He has suffered internal injuries. After landing the blow, Lian Tianxing realizes he may have caused a bit too much of a scene. The senior brother feels a bit awkward now, while our snake, unable to speak, hurls a string of classic insults at him in his mind. Ignoring the crowd of disciples, he flips his massive body and charges back toward Lian Tianxing in the kitchen with reckless abandon. He knows he can't win the fight, but that doesn't matter. He needs to show this man that he is a truly desperate soul. By acting like a madman, he bets that Lian won't actually dare to kill him here. The 9-meter serpent begins its chaotic counterattack. He thrashes through the dining hall filled with tables, creating a scene of absolute, unmitigated chaos as people and furniture fly everywhere. Lian Tianxing, who had started to calm down, feels his anger flare up again as he watches the snake turn the hall into a disaster zone. With blood rushing to his head in a fit of rage, he draws his precious sword and lunges. Our snake, however, doesn't hesitate for a second. He dives headfirst into the crowd of disciples, using them as living shields while Lian Tianxing screams for the vile beast to come out. The dining hall doors aren't exactly wide. Usually, the disciples are polite and give way to one another, so it's never a problem. But now, everything has turned into a chaotic mess. The disciples can't run and they can't hide, leaving them with nothing to do but curse loudly. The entire hall looks more like a rowdy street market, with food flying through the air and disciples jumping around in a panic. Manager Zhang and the others can only watch in stunned silence. Lian Tianxing finds himself slowed down, tripped up by the very disciples he leads. He doesn't dare use his sword skills for fear of hitting someone. Meanwhile, that clever snake stays low to the ground, hugging the floorboards. He weaves between table legs and human legs like a slippery eel, or perhaps a very large, very annoyed loach. While the dining hall is descending into utter madness, we shift our gaze to the nearby Taiji Square, where someone has noticed the commotion. A young man with silver hair frowns as he looks toward the kitchen. In an instant, his figure vanishes from where he was standing. He reappears high above the dining hall, looking down at the chaos below, and from this height, the view is quite revealing. We see a chaotic scene at the small kitchen entrance, where disciples are crawling out one after another as doors and windows continue to shatter. Disciples are tumbling out in a heap amidst broken tables, chairs, and rice bowls flying through the air in every direction. It is safe to say that since the founding of the Chunyang Palace, such a scene of absolute disorder has never been witnessed. The newcomer is none other than Qi Yun, one of the esteemed masters of Chunyang, known as Master Zishu. Qi Yun values law and etiquette above all else, as he is responsible for maintaining discipline and overseeing the palace defenses. He cannot tolerate even the slightest error, and seeing this mess, he is naturally consumed by a towering rage. Enough! Everyone stop at once, he bellows. Our snake, sensing the immense pressure, immediately drops flat against the ground. The other disciples are forced into similarly undignified positions, and even Lian Tianxing can't escape the command as he reaches the door. Su Ling, who had intended to break up the fight, ends up face down on the floor. Everyone remains as silent as winter cicadas. No one dares to move a muscle. With his profound cultivation, Qi Yun understands exactly what has happened with just a single glance. He glances at our snake, and that look alone is enough to send a chill down his spine, though thankfully, the gaze soon shifts away. His eyes land on Lian Tianxing. Uncle Qi, please listen, I was just silence. Qi Yun cuts him off sharply. Lian Tianxing's face pales as the master reminds him that he is the second disciple of the Chunyang Palace leader. To think you would lower yourself to bicker with a mere beast, have you no shame? How utterly foolish. I obey your command, Lian Tianxing says, bowing twice before taking his leave, though he clearly grits his teeth in frustration. After dealing with Lian Tianxing, Qi Yun turns his attention back to the white snake, his eyebrows twitching slightly. Our snake is so terrified, he doesn't even dare to flick his tongue. Who knows if this strict master might decide on a whim to have snake soup. Qi Yun then looks towards Su Ling, who is still pinned to the ground. Su Ling, your disciple is here, master. The white snake of Qingshu Palace lacks proper etiquette. Take him back and discipline him strictly for the next 3 months. The snake is forbidden from entering the dining hall to eat. Su Ling is quietly shocked that Master Qi Yun actually let the snake off so easily. Su Ling wonders when his uncle became so easygoing. After all, as one of the 5 sons of Chunyang, he can hardly afford to hold a grudge against a small snake. He dismisses the crowd, ordering craftsmen to repair the kitchen immediately. With a flick of his sleeve, Qi Yun vanishes into thin air. This display of teleportation leaves our white snake feeling quite envious. In the distance, Lien Tianxing is flying away, his face darkening as he overhears the light punishment Qi Yun gave the snake. He grinds his teeth and speeds off. Meanwhile, Su Ling pulls out a healing pill and pops it into our snake's mouth. The medicine makes him feel much better. Ignoring Su Ling's nagging, he wiggles his way back toward Qingshu Palace, though a surprise awaits. Upon his return, he is promptly punished by Yurong. Seeing the snake's predicament, Su Ling can't help but double over with laughter. Even Lien Yongmu, with his usual icy expression, feels his lips twitch. Before the divine statue, our snake holds his head high. He remains perfectly still, balancing a red candle on his head as Yurong forces him to serve as a living candle holder. Time passes, and we see Mount Hua in the northern winter. It is a world of ice and snow, looking very much like a fairyland. As the ice melts, water drips from the green tiles of the palace roof like rain. Yet, for some reason, a shadow lingers. Deep down, he feels a thick sense of unease he has never experienced before, a bitterness originating from the heavenly snake scripture. He lifts his head and swallows an entire box of discarded pill residue nearby, twisting his body slightly to settle the meal. He shifts his posture to continue his hibernation, absorbing the pills to build up his strength. He knows danger is coming. His instincts tell him to eat his fill and replenish his energy to face the impending crisis. The spring chill remains biting. He has no intention of going out. The low temperature would only make his body stiff and his thoughts sluggish, hardly ideal for survival. Rain falls on pear blossoms as the spring breeze fades, and greenery returns to the world. A cat lies on the roof, exposing its belly to enjoy the warm sunlight. The mountain is now covered in a vibrant blanket of wild flowers. The pear trees are as white as snow, and countless young couples have come out to enjoy the spring scenery. Even the sect leader has gone to the Sea of Flowers to enjoy wine and tea. Amidst this peace, Yurong steps out of the palace. Yurong frowns deeply as she looks toward the sky, where a strange, heavy pressure seems to be gathering in the clouds. Her fingers move in a rapid series of calculations before she turns to look at our snake, who is still serving his punishment. He had sneaked a spirit herb yesterday, not a very rare one, mind you, but she was still quite annoyed by his thievery. Yurong calls Dabai over, telling him to put down the candle. He carefully sets it aside and swims toward her. He coils himself up and looks at his nominal boss. 5 years have passed, and this beautiful master has changed. Instead of aging, she looks younger than ever. Her cultivation must have increased significantly to achieve this. She truly lives up to her reputation as one of the Chunyang Five. She asks him if he's been feeling a constant sense of dread. He thinks for a moment and nods. This is the lightning tribulation of a demon beast, and surviving it brings great rewards. Failure, however, means his soul will be scattered and his body destroyed. All those pill scraps he ate over the years are finally coming to a head. It turns out he can actually absorb and transform them, which is impressive. She tells him to rest and prepare for the coming trial. She warns him not to do it within the sect grounds, and certainly not to try and hide from it. The word tribulation carries a heavy weight. A certain sadness fills his heart. Human cultivators don't have to worry about heavenly tribulations during their early journey. They simply focus on their training, only facing a trial when they reach the very peak and prepare to ascend. It seems other species have it much harder. They barely begin their cultivation before the heavens come knocking, and then they have to do it all over again when it's finally time to ascend. If surviving the tribulation meant his power would skyrocket instantly, that would be one thing. But even after the lightning, he'll still just be a minor demon. One blast from a human's magical treasure, and it's all over. It feels like blatant species discrimination, really. Su Lin looks at him now with a very specific expression. Her eyes are full of pity. 5 years have passed, and Su Lin has grown into a striking young woman. Few cultivators are unattractive, but Su Lin is a beauty among beauties, playful, charming, and full of life. The only trouble is that she's a bit of a troublemaker. As for Yongmu, he remains a 1,000-year-old iceberg. If he isn't practicing his sword, he's doing his lessons. However, upon learning of the coming tribulation, he still brought out all his healing pills. His gaze was clear, practically screaming 3 words, "Don't you die." Su Lin pleads with her master, pointing out how pitiful Dabai is in asking for a few spiritual tools to help him survive. Yongmu stands silently by her side. Although he doesn't say a word, his expression mirrors Su Lin's perfectly. They both hope their master will grant some treasures for a safe trial. To be honest, Yurong doesn't want him dead either. The Qingshu Palace only has 3 people and 1 snake. Losing one would make life dreadfully boring. Yurong shakes her head helplessly. It seems this girl hasn't learned much else, but she has certainly mastered the art of acting spoiled. In the entire Chunyang sect, only their lineage maintains such a relaxed atmosphere, which fortunately saves them from a great deal of unnecessary drama. But for a demon, things are different. Gaining intelligence is hard enough, yet they must face the heavens just as they find success. For a beast to cultivate is to go against the natural order of heaven. It is, quite simply, a path filled with extreme peril. She explains that using magical treasures is actually a poor strategy for a demon. Relying on external items during a tribulation makes it difficult to fully transform later. One might end up neither human nor beast, with even their intelligence remaining flawed. Therefore, a demon must rely on their own body to resist the lightning and accept the baptism to truly wash away their worldly impurities. Only then can they build a solid foundation. She tells him to stay calm, and our snake nods, signaling he understands. Deep down, however, he is still incredibly nervous. Yurong then turns to Su Lin and Yongmu with an assignment. Since the white snake must go down the mountain for his trial, someone must be present to prevent any lowlives from taking advantage. She instructs the 2 of them to personally guard him, so they might also witness the terrifying majesty of heaven and earth. Even though he didn't get any spiritual treasures to help, having protectors is a decent consolation prize, or so he thinks. He doubts anyone would dare provoke the wrath of the Chunyang sect. With that settled, Su Lin dashes out the door like a streak of smoke. He felt that having just himself and his senior brother wasn't enough, so he decided to use his connections to find friends to help. More people meant more security, after all. Not long after, we see our snake slithering slowly toward the mountain gate, carrying a large gourd in his mouth filled with various flying elixirs. He also had the high-grade healing medicines given by Su Lin and Yang Mu. Yang Mu landed softly and followed right by his side as they headed out. Before long, a group of elegant female cultivators and their followers swarmed out of the gates in a grand, bustling procession. The disciples guarding the mountain gate stood there completely dumbfounded. Our snake, however, was quite pleased. The gloomy clouds that had gathered above him for days seemed a bit less depressing now. You see, the thing a demonic beast fears most during a tribulation is someone interfering with the process. Demonic beasts are essentially solitary creatures, and their natural enemies would never miss an opportunity to strike while they are vulnerable. Then, of course, there are the human cultivators to worry about. If the tribulation fails, they simply scavenge whatever bones and flesh are left behind by the lightning to use as materials for alchemy. It is, in their eyes, a business deal where they can't lose. We move to an unnamed small hill at the foot of the mountain. There, our snake coils himself at the summit, remaining perfectly still. Since he can't run away, he has resigned himself to his fate. When faced with an unavoidable heavenly tribulation, the only option is to fight with everything you have. If you survive, a vast new world awaits. If you fail, you die. There is no respawning in this world. Above him, the dark clouds churn and roll with increasing intensity. It looked as though the storm could break at any moment. Su Lin glanced at the sky with a hint of fear, and who could blame her, really? Even for a low-level spirit, a tribulation is no easy encounter. The heavy weight of heavenly majesty filled the air, acting as a warning to every cultivator who dares to defy the natural order. Ants and rats fled their homes in a frenzy to escape the eye of the storm. The birds and beasts had long since vanished. Near the hill, several tents were pitched where Su Lin and the other female disciples took up residence. The strange activity in the sky soon attracted attention. A group of 5 or 6 cultivators used their lightness skills to approach the hill. They spotted the motionless white snake on the summit, but they also noticed the disciples of the Chunyang sect standing guard. These newcomers were specialists in capturing or hunting demonic beasts, and they were clearly looking for an opportunity. They calculated that catching it after the tribulation would fetch a massive price, and a higher sale meant a bigger commission for them. Common beasts were easy to find, but a white snake was a rare prize indeed, especially one with skin as smooth and refined as jade. It truly was a rare find, though they found it strange that a demonic beast would dare undergo its tribulation right at the foot of Mount Hua. If they hadn't been passing by, they never would have spotted it. They also wondered what those Chunyang sect disciples were doing there. They speculated whether the disciples were also waiting for a chance to seize the beast. One young cultivator, appearing to be in his 20s, raised his hand to stop the discussion, his eyes betraying a flicker of pure greed as he stared at our white snake. Still puzzled by the presence of the Chunyang sect disciples, he decided to take matters into his own hands and approach them alone. As he walked toward Su Lin and the others, Yang Mu opened his eyes and watched him with a perfectly expressionless gaze. He then drifted down lightly to stand in front of Su Lin. The female cultivators gave the newcomers a brief glance before looking away. They didn't bother with them further, trusting Yang Mu to handle the negotiations. After all, the idea of someone causing trouble here was unthinkable. Even at the foot of the mountain, this was still Chunyang sect territory, and their status in the cultivation world was, to put it mildly, beyond question. The man introduced himself as Zheng Yong, greeting the fellow Taoists of Chunyang and claiming he was there to assist in subduing a demon. Standing across from him was Yang Mu, whose face remained a permanent mask of ice. He looked at Zheng Yong with a look of pure, unadulterated disdain. He stated coldly that the snake belonged to the Chunyang sect, and then, quite dismissively, he simply closed his eyes again. Zheng Yong persisted, asking if they might part with a high-quality snake skin for 1,000 gold. Yang Mu's response was a single word: scram. It was the height of arrogance. Zheng Yong froze for a moment, a dark, simmering anger beginning to rise within him. He wondered when the Chunyang sect had started raising demonic beasts, or if this boy was simply trying to deceive him. He felt insulted that such a young brat dared to look down on him. In the ruthless world of cultivation, everyone has blood on their hands. He believed that if one isn't ruthless, one cannot stand firm. Perhaps his killing intent was too obvious, because Yang Mu opened his eyes and glared at him. The sword on Yang Mu's back began to inch out of its scabbard. Sensing the danger, Zheng Yong's entire body tensed, and he quickly buried his dark thoughts. In that case, I won't disturb you further. I'll take my leave, Zheng Yong said, retreating quickly before things turned ugly. Whether he truly intended to strike or was just putting on a show, he knew better than to be reckless here, so close to Mount Hua. If he actually provoked the great masters of the Chunyang sect, his backers wouldn't be able to protect him, not in the slightest. In fact, his entire sect might be uprooted along with him. Returning to Tong Ha's side, Zheng Yong felt a bitter sting of resentment. His envy of the great sect's disciples had curdled into a deep hatred, though his reason told him not to cause unnecessary trouble. Boss, those priests are interfering, he muttered. His leader simply replied, don't ask questions, let's go. Yang Mu watched the cultivators disappear with a cold gaze, unsure if they were incredibly brave or just remarkably foolish. To target a demonic snake raised by one of the 5 great masters of Chunyang was a bold move indeed. It seemed the Chunyang palace hadn't displayed its true power to the world in quite some time. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mountain, Zheng Yong led Tong Hua and the others to a town at the foot of Mount Hua, where they entered an inn and pushed open a door. Inside was a handsome young man in his 20s, senior brother Lin. The one undergoing the tribulation is a white snake demon. But those Chunyang priests are guarding it. They stopped us, claiming the beast belongs to them, Zheng Yong complained. They're just a bunch of kids, senior brother Lin. Why don't we? He paused, his meaning clear enough without words. He made a sharp slicing motion across his throat. Senior brother Lin smiled, his face full of mockery as they began to plot. Soon, the group of cultivators headed straight for the nameless hill where our snake had remained motionless for 3 days. Above, the clouds had turned as black as ink, pressing down with a weight that made it difficult to even breathe. Waking from a long slumber, the snake understood that the heavenly tribulation was imminent. He could feel its terrifying power. Facing life or death, a fierce, bloodthirsty instinct was triggered from the very depths of his soul, the true nature of a beast. He wanted the heavens to know that here on the ground was a small, humble snake who was not afraid to die. In that singular moment, it was as if he were no longer just a greedy little white snake who liked to steal food. Instead, he had become a true beast of legend. Below the mountain, the strange movement of the clouds began to draw quite a lot of attention. Yurong frowned deeply as she watched the sky. She realized that things were starting to veer significantly off course. Under normal circumstances, a wild beast tribulation should only involve gathering dark clouds and a few strikes of lightning. Why had it turned into a swirling vortex of thunderclouds? It made no sense for a mere snake demon's ascension. He wasn't some ancient calamity, and the white snake didn't possess any rare, primordial bloodlines. So, why was this happening? After a moment's thought, Yurong flew toward the Yushu Palace to find the sect leader, Li Xiangyan, who was standing before the hall. As if he had already guessed his junior sister would come, Li Xiangyan waited. He looked quite elderly, wearing the jade crown of his office. Dressed in his formal Taoist robes, his white eyebrows and beard reached almost to his waist, and he held a whisk, looking half asleep. To an outsider, he appeared to be nothing more than a common old man, which, in this world, is usually a sign of great power. Those close to him knew he had already reached the realm of ascension, with a cultivation so deep it was truly unfathomable. Li Xiangyan smiled, his long beard and eyebrows fluttering in the wind, looking perfectly calm and detached from the world's worries. "Junior sister, I assume you've come because of that white snake?" he asked. "I have," she replied simply. "It is merely a transformation tribulation, yet it is so violent. I fear my little snake will find it difficult to survive. Brother, do you know why the heavens are reacting this way?" He looked at the sky and spoke of 3 things: opportunity, fate, and the natural order of creation. Yurong remained puzzled, unable to grasp the deeper meaning behind his cryptic words. The sect leader explained that this particular tribulation for the white snake was exceptionally dangerous. The difficulty far exceeded that of any ordinary beast attempting to take a human form. But if he survives, his future potential will be limitless. That is the opportunity hidden within the peril. After all, everything under heaven has its fixed destiny, and the snake was currently busy trying to rewrite his. Even I, with all my years of study, can only catch a fleeting glimpse of his destiny. This, it seems, is the unique path of his fate, unpredictable and shrouded in mystery. This tribulation is actually a blessing in disguise for that white snake, a rare chance for transformation. Do not worry, junior sister. The little snake's destiny does not end here today. If we nurture him with care, he may become something truly extraordinary. Perhaps, in the future, he will even enhance the spiritual fortune of our Chunyang sect. Li Xiangyan let out a hearty laugh before returning to the Yushu Palace, leaving Yurong to finally breathe a sigh of relief. She felt a spark of curiosity regarding the sect leader's words about the snake's potential. While down at the storm center, our snake prepared. He braced himself for the heavenly tribulation as ink-black clouds swallowed the world, turning day into a premature twilight. Su Ling and the others instinctively backed away, unaware that eyes were watching them from the shadows of the forest. Only Yangmu looked back with a hint of suspicion, sensing that while they watched the snake, someone else was watching them. A senior disciple of the Chunyang sect decided he had to deal with these lurking threats before the white snake's tribulation began. Zheng Yong and his companion, surnamed Lin, were eyeing the Chunyang disciples with growing malice, especially Su Ling and the other women. Their dark intentions were clear. They were itching to capture them and sell them off to wicked cultivators. But the senior disciple, arriving on his flying sword, didn't bother with explanations as his blade flashed through the air. A few bodies hit the ground in an instant. Yangmu turned and saw the senior brother, recognizing the lethal grace of that sword light. Realizing the hidden danger had been neutralized, Yangmu offered a respectful bow, and the senior disciple nodded before flying back toward the gate. Su Ling, as oblivious as ever, simply waved at the receding streak of light in the sky, wondering what was happening. "Wait, isn't that the senior brother who guards the mountain gate?" she asked, completely puzzled. What was he doing here? Yangmu shook his head, realizing he'd need to take Su Ling out for more training in the future. The Chunyang sect needs experienced, decisive cultivators, and a sudden shout pulls everyone's attention back to the reality at hand. The heavenly tribulation has begun. Time seems to freeze as, in slow motion, the thick clouds begin to churn. Suddenly, a blinding light erupts, followed immediately by a dazzling bolt of lightning snaking its way down from the heavens. It strikes directly at the white snake standing tall on the ground, hitting him almost instantly with a deafening crack. After the thunderous roar, the snake that was just standing proud is now pinned to the earth, smoke rising from his charred scales. With his keen sense of smell, he can actually scent his own scales being roasted, and to be honest, it hurts like absolute hell. Being struck by lightning is far worse than touching a live wire. His entire body goes numb in a single, agonizing instant. Shaking his head, the white snake is filled with fury, but no sooner has he finished cursing internally than another bolt descends. Normally, lightning shouldn't strike this fast. It needs time to build up, but today, the heavens have switched to rapid-fire mode. In his numbed state, he wonders if his cursing provoked the heavens. Perhaps it's better to save the insults for after he survives. But just as that thought crosses his mind, yet another bolt of lightning crashes down upon him. The scales on his back shatter, revealing raw flesh. Up at the Yushu Palace, the sect leader watches the constant flickering with confusion. It is strange, indeed. Even he finds himself wondering why the tribulation is behaving so erratically. Since when did the heavenly tribulation change its pattern like this? Meanwhile, the snake's protective scales continue to splinter. Drenched in blood, his internal energy works frantically to repair the damage, but the flesh simply cannot grow back fast enough. The lightning falls with such speed that his natural armor has no time to regenerate between the strikes. Each bolt hitting an open wound causes even greater destruction. What was a white snake just moments ago is now barely recognizable. In just a few breaths, he has become a blood-red snake. Watching from a distance, Su Ling and the others are pale with terror. They realize that if they continue their own cultivation toward immortality, they too will one day have to face such a trial. The thought is enough to shake their very resolve. Though being young, they manage to snap themselves out of the shock quickly. At the very least, witnessing this allows them to prepare so they aren't left in the dark. It is a trial in itself. After 7 or 8 consecutive bolts, the lightning finally stops, not because it's over, but because it is gathering strength. The white snake, nearly buried in the earth, lifts his head to shake off the mud, his eyes now gleaming with intelligence. The heavenly tribulation is a hardship, yes, but also a test. Every bolt endured brings a profound change to the body. The pain and blood have fully awakened the snake's wild nature, and he ignores the healing pills he had prepared. In a fit of primal fury, he glares at the heavens. One might think Dabai has gone mad, but no, he hasn't. Relying on external items to survive the tribulation makes the breakthrough incomplete, leaving flaws in one's very foundation. Many monsters who look human but retain beastly features are the result of taking shortcuts with such external aids. By relying on his own strength, his power will increase immensely, making him far stronger than any human of the same rank. Humans focus on spells and rarely temper their physical bodies, which allows them to advance quickly, perhaps a bit too quickly. We see that monsters are more balanced. Humans only surpass them by using superior cultivation methods and magical treasures. Without those tools, humans would naturally fall short when compared to the raw power of a beast. It's true that a monster's constitution is incredibly strong, but the senior brother tells his sister not to overthink it. Human cultivation is much faster than that of monsters, whose progress is often agonizingly slow. It takes them 10, 100, or even 10,000 times longer to advance, accumulating power over vast stretches of time. This makes their internal energy incredibly dense and vast, meaning one must be extremely cautious when facing them later. The junior sister is impressed by his knowledge, though he reminds her that their master taught this long ago. He teases that she likely forgot while playing, even as the wind and lightning begin to swirl around the white snake again. When facing the heavenly tribulation, willpower is everything, and right on cue, the lightning begins to fall once more. His flesh is torn until the bloody bone is visible as sparks dance across his body before dissipating into the earth. The immense pain constantly sears the white snake's soul, and though he is desperate to faint, he knows he cannot lose consciousness. To do so would mean certain death, especially as the vortex of black clouds above continues to brew with terrifying intensity. Dabai can feel that the final bolt of lightning is approaching. If he survives this, a vast new world awaits him. If he fails, however, this scorched earth will be his final resting place. All he can do now is lift his stubborn head high, making sure the heavens know exactly where he stands. Refusing to yield, the white snake opens his mouth to hiss a warning at the sky, revealing 2 sharp, glistening fangs. Watching from a distance, Su Ling and the others are absolutely stunned, convinced that Dabai has finally lost his mind. Yet, seeing that unyielding figure against the sky, they feel a sudden, involuntary shift in their own cultivation realms. That fierce defiance finally draws the heaven's response. A mysterious purple lightning bolt descends from the swirling vortex. In an instant, the bolt slams into the white snake's raised head, driving him deep into the earth and creating a massive crater. The purple lightning chars the snake to a crisp. Then, as the vortex dissipates, sunlight begins to peek through the clouds. Su Ling and Yang Mu rush to the hilltop, staring down at the blackened, unrecognizable object lying in the pit. They stand there completely at a loss, wondering if poor Dabai has truly been reduced to nothing but charcoal. Even Yang Mu feels that things have spiraled out of control as he looks at the long, scorched shape below. It looks exactly like a piece of coal. It seems the heavenly tribulation has quite literally roasted Dabai into dye. Yang Mu is at a loss for words, but suddenly, a faint sound echoes through the silence, a distinct crack. He quickly stops Su Ling from crying, pricking up his ears and staring intently at the long piece of black charcoal. The sound was small, but unmistakable. Could it be that Dabai is actually still alive? A moment later, everyone hears it, a series of sharp cracks coming directly from the charred remains. We see that the charcoal near the snake's head is beginning to split, revealing a web of growing fractures. Beneath the crumbling charcoal, a smooth, jade-white snake face begins to emerge as the scorched outer layer falls away. It is indeed our white snake, having survived his ordeal. Su Ling rushes forward in joy, but Yang Mu quickly holds her back. He warns her not to move, explaining that Dabai is shedding his skin as the heavens actually grant great gifts during a tribulation. His physical body is being tempered and his cultivation refined, and for a snake, the most direct sign of progress is this very molting. It is a simple and clear transformation. As the blackened shell shatters completely, a much larger white snake appears before them. Having escaped death, the white snake is ecstatic, knowing he can now live for a very long time without worrying about ascension. To be honest, it is best not to hope for such things too soon, especially considering the terrors of a true ascension tribulation. That is a problem for many years in the future. For now, he raises his head high, savoring his hard-won success. We learn that this ordeal was actually a transformation tribulation, meaning that from now on, he can practice the art of changing shape. The most common use for this is taking human form to walk among mortals, much like those countless fox spirits we hear of. Those are the stories of spirits seeking out scholars, or perhaps a boar spirit becoming a son-in-law. This is exactly what they use. Of course, most demons wouldn't be foolish enough to wander into the human world for no reason. Otherwise, they would eventually find their heads hanging from a city wall. Soon enough, the chaos of the tribulation fades back into calm. The white snake returns to his daily routine of guarding the gate, eating spirit pills, or occasionally eavesdropping on lessons. However, Su Ling and Yang Mu seem to have been truly shaken by the heavens, as they now practice with a newfound, serious intensity. This change brings great comfort to Rome. As for the actual transformation, Dabai will have to figure that out on his own. The idea that one simply turns into a human the moment lightning strikes makes little sense. It is far too painful for that. Who would have the presence of mind to control their flesh and bone while being electrocuted? After the lightning passes, it simply means his control over energy has improved, allowing him to gradually adjust his physical form away from that of a beast. To become human permanently would be quite meaningless anyway, as every creature under heaven has its own reason for existing. There is truly no need to abandon one's own race just to become something neither human nor beast. After all, humans are humans, and demons are demons. This is an unchanging truth of the world. Our white snake knows he can transform after the tribulation, but he is in no hurry. It simply doesn't matter to him. He has been in this immortal world for 65 years now, and has long since grown accustomed to the life of a reptile. He takes it all quite lightly. Furthermore, within the Pure Yang Palace, there are no specific cultivation techniques designed for demonic beasts to follow. So, Dabai simply decided to practice the Pure Yang Taoist arts instead, and with considerable success. One can only imagine what the Pure Yang ancestor would think if he knew his sacred techniques were being mastered by a snake. To be honest, his expression would likely be quite a sight. We return to the main hall of the Qingshu Palace, where Yurong sits in the seat of honor, while Su Ling and Yang Mu stand respectfully before her. She asks them what they have learned from Dabai's tribulation, calling on Su Ling to speak first. Su Ling steals a cautious glance at her master, realizing that today, she won't be able to act spoiled to get out of answering. She begins by saying that she felt Dabai's struggle was incredibly difficult. Yurong waits for more, so Su Ling looks up, gazing piteously at Yang Mu, hoping her senior brother might step in and draw their master's attention away from her. When Yurong presses for more, Yang Mu finally steps forward. Yes, master, he says. First of all, a tribulation is easily disturbed by others, so one must have a perfect plan or make the enemy fear to interfere. Secondly, he admits that he and his junior sister lack worldly experience, as they failed to notice those people lurking in the shadows. Thirdly, he notes that cultivation is an act of defying heaven, a constant struggle to grasp that single, slim thread of survival. No matter how difficult it becomes, one must never give up. Fourthly, the heavenly tribulation is a test for all who walk the path of cultivation. One must summon the courage to face it directly, for if that courage is lacking, then everything else is for naught. Yurong approves, noting that while cultivation is hard, it is even harder for Dabai. Humans, after all, live in a relatively peaceful environment. With abundant resources at their disposal, humans don't have to worry quite as much during their practice. They don't face the same constant struggle for survival or the same brutal transformation trials. Humans are, in many ways, the favorites of heaven. She warns them not to become arrogant, noting that Dabai has survived countless crises, growing stronger with every setback. This resilience is something they must learn to emulate. The two young disciples nod in solemn agreement. Reading 10,000 books is no match for traveling 10,000 miles, she tells them. So soon they will go down the mountain. Yurong expected her disciples to be heartbroken at the thought of leaving her side. However, she couldn't have been more wrong. The moment Su Ling hears the word travel, her eyes light up with excitement, and even the stoic Yang Mu cannot hide his joy. A faint smile touches his lips, leaving Yurong momentarily stunned. She begins to wonder, quite reasonably, if these two are actually her loyal disciples or just eager to escape. So, Su Ling asks, when exactly do we leave? Feeling a bit sentimental about how quickly children grow up and want to leave home, Yurong simply stands to depart. Her voice drifts back to them from a distance. Once Dabai can take human form, the three of you shall go together. Su Ling cheers, immediately wanting to find Dabai and pressure him to transform so they can finally go out and play. She has wanted to see the city of Chang'an for ages. With her usual whirlwind energy, Su Ling rushes off to find him. At this hour, Dabai is usually waiting for the disciples of the Lingshu Palace to fail at their alchemy. He enjoys eating the discarded failed pills. In fact, in the entire Pure Yang Palace, only a snake would have such a wish. The manager in charge of the pill scraps shakes his head, looking at the latest batch of failures with a sigh. For some reason, the failure rate has been rising lately. Meanwhile, our white snake is quite confused about this transformation business. He looks at the expectant faces of Su Ling and Yang Mu, failing to see why he should bother turning into a human. He spends his days eating scraps and secretly learning secret arts. Life is good. Why change when crawling is so comfortable? Deciding he's had enough of these two lunatics, he turns to leave. Hey Dabai, if you transform, we can all travel. Su Ling shouts after him that the world below is full of fun, but the white snake remains entirely unmoved. To him, the world below is just full of bandits and people with nothing better to do than hunt demons. No thank you. Our hero, who was actually busy gathering materials for alchemy and chi cultivation, knew that a small snake spirit like himself going down the mountain would sooner or later be caught and thrown into a circus to perform. Yes, to be perfectly honest, that was the most likely outcome. At this stage, Dabai couldn't even be considered a true demon. Calling him a snake spirit was far more accurate. Su Ling shouts for him not to leave, but the white snake simply wiggles his body and slithers away at high speed. He feels Su Ling is the most unreliable person he knows, and it seems even Yang Mu has been infected by her nonsense. I hear Chang'an is the most prosperous city, she calls out. She describes the exotic people from the western regions and the flourishing culture of Suzhou in the south. She mentions the incredible talents at the Lion Festival and suggests they go see it. Suddenly, Dabai pauses. After thinking it over, he decides that seeing the most prosperous city of the ancient world wouldn't be so bad, so he nods in agreement. Yang Mu maintains his cool expression, though a small smile touches his lips as he turns to leave with effortless grace. Su Ling is filled with admiration. Having decided to transform, Dabai finds a cave halfway up the back mountain of Lingshu Palace. He calls it a secluded meditation, but in reality, no one else can even get inside because the entrance is narrow and winds for dozens of meters. Inside, however, it is a hidden paradise. To him, transformation isn't a matter of life and death, though the first time is a very slow process. It feels as if every bone in his body is being crushed and reorganized. Dabai realizes he will need several days to complete the task. They say that once the first transformation is finished, switching forms in the future becomes quick and easy. For the first few days, the white snake lies motionless in the cave until his cells and skeleton have been modified to adapt to the change. Only then does the true transformation begin. Substances on the stalactites emit a soft, gentle glow, illuminating the cavern. After shedding layers of skin, the 12-meter-long body of the white snake begins to shrink. As his frame grows smaller, human physical characteristics slowly and steadily begin to emerge. Once the details of his body are finished, his tightly closed eyes snap open, still showing the vertical slits of a serpent. But after closing them and blinking once more, they turn into human pupils. He stands on two legs, feeling entirely unnatural. Still habitually wanting to crawl on the ground, the white snake struggles to recall the sensation of walking from his past life. His legs gradually steady themselves, but after transforming, he feels something is off. There are no mirrors here, of course. He decides he'll have to wait until he returns to Lingshu Palace to see his reflection, though he remains largely indifferent to his appearance. Even if he was human in a past life, he has spent over 60 years as a cold-blooded predator, living a life of hunting and killing. With such a history, there isn't much left to care about. His mindset is incredibly calm, even if he has become a half-human monster. In the worst-case scenario, he could simply stay in the Great Mountains forever. With a leap forward, he instantly reverts to his snake form. He slithers quickly out of the cave and back to Lingshu Palace, where he finds Yurong and her two disciples in the middle of training. Performing the art of transformation, his snake scales shift into clothing, and in the blink of an eye, he takes on a human shape. Strangely enough, Dabai notices that he seems a bit short, roughly the same height as Su Ling. In fact, the three practitioners in front of the hall are left speechless. Yang Mu, in particular, looks as though he's seen a ghost. He doesn't even notice the arrow dropping from his hand. Su Ling looks him up and down, noting how complete the transformation is. She suggests he should dress up properly, while Yang Mu can only manage 3 words. It's truly beautiful. Dabai looks at them, puzzled. He then looks down at himself and realizes that his chest seems somewhat high, which is certainly unexpected. Yurong asks if he truly doesn't know what he looks like. He nods. There were no mirrors in the cave, after all. She tells him there is a bronze mirror in her study. Dabai leaps forward, shifting back into the great white snake once more. He rushes toward the study. To him, this transformation is like a lottery. He might win nothing, or he might hit the jackpot. After slithering into the room, he instantly shifts back into human form. And this is where things get truly interesting. Dabai stands frozen in shock. The mirror reflects a girl, not very tall, appearing to be about 15 years old, with delicate features, a small cherry-like mouth, and phoenix eyes set against a graceful nose.